Hello friends, what is up? I hope you're all doing good, I know I am. Welcome to Sans Crypto, yet another crypto channel to further saturate this industry. Just what you wanted, wasn't it? Basically I started this channel to talk about crypto, as you've probably guessed by now. Both because I love projects like ADA, and because I find weirdo projects that I need to share, but my friends never have any idea what I'm on about. And rightly so, because neither do I. One of the first segments I came up with was called BINCOIN or WINCOIN. Essentially trying to figure out which coins can get in the bin and which ones win. So, the first crypto project I'm going to talk about, or blockchain even, is RCHAIN, which is a really interesting project, but for mostly the wrong reasons, sort of. I'm honestly surprised it's still around given the project's failings over the past few years since their inception, which would actually suggest some kind of strength and endurance in the future. But then again, with some of the reputations that RCHAIN has, who knows? Much like a few other projects like Polkadot and Cardano, RCHAIN was founded by someone who had former ties with Ethereum in the early days. I hear this person had a heated disagreement with Vitalik Buterin, just like everyone else in the world did, although he does deny this. This man is Lucius Greg Meredith, or Greg for short. He later went on to form RCHAIN, which is heavily focused on being a blockchain that can improve on Ethereum's faults. RCHAIN sets out to be the most powerful and widely used smart contract platform in the world, and it utilizes row calculus rather than pi calculus, something they discuss a lot and have done for quite a while. This essentially sets out to solve concurrency issues. It also has the opportunity to run transactions horizontally rather than vertically. Horizontally meaning that a row of many transactions can be processed at the same time. That is, rather than transactions being processed vertically, one by one, single file. RCHAIN uses the much more relevant and functional proof-of-stake system, which is far more efficient both environmentally and in regards to performance. Price performance! Basically, RCHAIN has been trading since around 2017, so a while now. It has a relatively small circulating supply of 625 million. Okay, it's not nothing, but compared to the billions and trillions of ADA and SHIB, it's relatively small, and this is exactly the kind of circulating supply along with small market cap that would draw people in, dreaming of landing on the moon. And they would be correct, but only if the project has some clout, a strong purpose, and some great marketing. At least by this point in RCHAIN's tenure, that's true. Right off the bat, I'd say this project does not have these things. Sometimes it's like they think they have the solutions to all the blockchain problems, but they don't seem to do much with it. In a recent video titled RCast 140, Greg the CEO didn't ask me anything, or an AMA as you kids call it. In the video he discussed some of the project's shortfalls when it comes to marketing. He suggests they may have not spread the word as much as they could have during key releases. He also noted they were taking it slow when it comes to exchange listings. This is due to regulatory concerns and the fact that all the nodes were being entirely controlled internally at the time. This has likely hindered their adoption somewhat too. There are many points in the past where they failed massively when it comes to marketing, or at least they've discussed that they haven't had much marketing power at all. We can see a long period of sideways trading for the most part of 3 years. After the initial dump in mid-2018, a little action in mid to late 2019, but then pretty much nothing substantial until mid-2021. To be fair, it jumped from 1 cent all the way up to 40 cents. So you know, you can't really go wrong with that. A little bit of 40x gains, and it is trading around 10 cents at the moment. So a decent reset from the lull of 2020. Not much though. I am kind of surprised by this jump in price because they are relatively ghosty. Most of their online presence comes from their own videos uploaded to their own channel which get very little attention. There's not a lot going on. Little to no major or smaller YouTube channels talking about the chain. And it's been this way for around 2 to 3 years now. And of course the project has been surrounded by bad press, but more so in the earlier days. But it's hard to get away from that once it's out there. Like I mentioned though, it does have the draw of a low market cap and circulating supply which could attract people, at least for the short term gains. Even if the project is a little rocky, sometimes this is enough for in a bull market to gain that notoriety. But yeah, some things about this project do seem promising, and it would have been a gem to look out for if they didn't fudge it up so much earlier on down the line. If we talk about the fundamentals of due diligence in the crypto world, it does tick a lot of the boxes, even if they did scribble all over the page as they were going along. Transparency! One of the fundamentals would be transparency and the information that's available to us. So first off, we're going to look at the website. Straight away we can see the website looks pretty decent. It definitely doesn't look half-baked or thrown together. They've got a mini roadmap dated up to July 2021. This is when we saw the most recent spike, so that would give us an idea of those movements. We can see the mainnet is live now as well, so well done boys. Did good. At least you've got that going for you. Clicking into the technical roadmap, it's been laid out pretty well, and it literally goes all the way into 2023. To be fair, a lot of the time I do get lost trying to understand some of this stuff, but it's definitely a good sign that they have this laid out and it does go well into the future. Moving on to the white paper, it's pretty robust. However, there have been criticisms of the project flip-flopping its aims and goals a number of times, getting distracted and sidelining their flagship product. A part of the flip-flop issues came about likely because they've gone through a lot of trouble with funding and marketing. They've made some bad decisions that led to further desperate decision making down the line. We get a sense that they've been pretty damn loose with the financial side of things on many occasions, acting mischievously with private investor funds and also after ICOs. At a certain point in time, it seemed like they were making large purchases that were unnecessary to develop their project, or that they just couldn't afford at all. And I think in the crypto world, people are suspicious of everything, even when they don't necessarily have good reason to be. So when you throw 1,000 reasons out there, you can imagine how this magnifies distrust. GitHub. The next important part of due diligence is having a little nosy at GitHub, which can be a very good indicator for the project's pulse or lifeline. A window into their development, if you will. Now, I'm not going to lie and say I understand coding, or that I'm even 100% familiar with all of GitHub either, but a sign of life around there would be generally a good sign. There are some projects that have GitHubs that have never made any repositories, or they haven't made repositories for years. Some don't have GitHub at all, or they used to and it just doesn't exist anymore. In RCHAIN's case, we actually see they have a very active GitHub, and it's promising. We can see updates incredibly recently and going backwards from there regularly. As an example of a bad GitHub, there's a native Cardano project that in my opinion is most likely a scam. They've acted strangely on their Twitter, have very little visibility, and the GitHub updated with 4 repositories on the 8th of May 2021, and nothing else since then. For a new project that should be getting big dev time is pretty poor, and people expect these things. This plays alongside having a ghost team, an unprofessional and lackluster community presence, and not a care in the world. But yeah, you can see a lot of activity in terms of dev for RCHAIN, and this goes hand in hand with the project's roadmap, I guess. Online presence. The next fundamental in terms of due diligence would be their online presence. They're active on Twitter and they regularly post blogs for their community, which is promising. They're even more active on YouTube, posting weekly and sometimes more. They've been doing this for years and years. They attend a fair few conferences which get posted online, and they get occasional interviews with Crypto Coin Show, whatever that is. To be honest though, from these videos came one of my first concerns about the project, and that was the CEO, Greg. There was something about him that made me feel uncomfortable. He came across like half cult leader, half used car salesman. I don't know, he just has a vibe. And the article later on that we'll get into and a few other things kind of plays to this. I just get shifty hippie vibes from him. The initial What is RCHAIN video from 2018 seems decent. It's well presented, everyone seems like they know what they're on about, and overall it seems promising. There are a few other well-produced videos on the channel from that time too, and they clearly had some money to throw around. But this is part of the problem, I would assume. In the Roland Explained video, it seems a little bit glam, overproduced, with twinkly music and pan-out shots of a beautiful beachside environment to set this superficial tone. The house it was filmed in, I believe, is a house that cost $1.5 million, and it was bought with the initial funding, which was a wild move. But this we'll get into later on. Partnerships. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of clear or functional partnerships at the moment, and there never really have been. At least if you compare to very well-known blockchains and crypto projects that are continuously sharing connections with other crypto projects, and in some cases mainstream non-crypto and corporate entities. But there is one that has been mentioned in a recent interview with Crypto Coin Show. This is called Dazzle.io, DAASL. This is a blockchain-based software as service company to grow dApp ecosystems on both RCHAIN and other platforms. Maybe this will be the boost they need to grow RCHAIN and progress further. Dazzle seem to have a focus on solving problems with advertising and personal data, amongst other things. Controversy. Now this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. When I first started looking into the chain, if I'm honest, something did feel a little bit off about the project in general. Not just Greg, the project as a whole. I think the too good to be true aspect of the price potential was a part of this. I thought they're active, they talk the talk, they tick the right boxes. Why is the project dragging so much after such a booming start? Well, this may explain it. Looking through the Reddit community over the past year, it does look like they get quite a bad rap, with many people calling it a dead project, a ghost chain, blah blah blah. But at the same time, they are getting a lot of support and defense from some of the responders. Now don't get me wrong, I don't take the Reddit community's word for gospel, because everyone's a bastard. But it can be a good place to go, sometimes. Maybe. And then of course there are many people noting the past controversies, which is understandable. But even then we do see a project and a CEO that have been active in their own way, and they definitely do show signs of life. Even if it is a little bit slow, there is something happening. If people were to Google RCHAIN, they could find a lot of lengthy Reddit posts and articles about the shenanigans that RCHAIN got up to in the past. This of course would not help their present day reputation, with it being so easy to find accusations of scamming and financial foul play. There was an article by Ian Edwards written February 2019 for GeekWire called Boom, Bust and Blockchain. RCHAIN Cooperative's cryptocurrency dreams dissolve into controversy. Sorry, that's it's a hell of a headline, and a dramatic one at that. And at the top there, we see the house that was featured on the MTV Cribs video they did. The house was owned by RCHAIN, and the property was the base of their operations. It states the home is just one of the unusual aspects of its story, a story complete with heated controversies, high-profile defections, and plunging financial valuations that have left the future of RCHAIN in question. I mean, this was at the time, but they're still around now. I wouldn't say they're doing well, but, you know. In 2017, they held an ICO aiming for $15 million. They raised $10 million through a private sale to investors at 20 cents per coin, and a minimum of $50,000. This attracted another investor who purchased the remaining $5 million. Word kind of spread about RCHAIN in the investment world, and they ran another ICO, raising a total of $31 million overall. Shortly after the ICO, Greg was hacked. $300,000 of crypto was stolen from a co-op wallet, and mysteriously there was no follow-up. How strange. Also after the ICO, the value of their coin called Rock had fallen from the all-time high of $2.86. It fell to less than 3 cents. It was ranked around 30 on CoinMarketCap, later dropping to 232, and at present it's well into the 400s. And like we said, they purchased the house for $1.5 million. This was in 2018. We can see from Zillow that it was sold in 2019, and this was for $1.27 million. This is really quite odd. The initial purchase, the duration they held it, and then selling it for $2 to $3 million less a year later. I mean, what? A balance sheet was released by RCHAIN during its annual member meeting in October 2018. This showed it had liabilities exceeding its liquid assets. This was by more than $10.5 million, and we can see the clear difference between then and now in terms of marketing. They were clearly throwing a lot more money around back then, whether it was responsible or not. A test version of the blockchain was released in September 2018, but the mainnet launch of RCHAIN was supposed to happen at the end of December, and it was delayed. It was suggested that Q2 in 2019 was more realistic, and one of their investors, Reflective Ventures, said,
"We're very hopeful, but hope is not a strategy."
Reflective Ventures came onto the scene in 2017, which didn't sit well with some of the co-op members. It was a firm of executives that would fund businesses. These would develop apps for the ecosystem once the mainnet had been launched. And the people who formed this company are all sorts of spicy. One of the founding partners was David M. Otto. He was charged in 2009 by the SEC. This was due to being caught up in a penny stock pump and dump scheme. He eventually settled with the SEC in 2011, paying more than $225,000 in fines. He also received a 5-year ban from participating in penny stock offerings. Otto was also the business partner of Steve Bannon, the former advisor to Donald Trump. This was in several companies that were involved in legal difficulties in the early 2000s. Alongside Otto at Reflective Ventures was Steve Carell. I'll call him Steve Carell. He was alongside Steve Carell, who was the associate director at Otto's investment firm Otto Capital. Carell was involved in controversy in the early 2000s too. He was chairman of the board for Firefighters National Trust, set up to help fallen firefighters. The charity raised millions of dollars in the wake of the attacks on September the 11th. but there are allegations of financial mismanagement by the board, and it shut down in 2005. Only 65% of the millions that came into the trust went to charity. Corel has since gone on to become CFO of Casper Labs, a blockchain startup that is using some of RCHAIN's open source codebase. So they were basically a hard fork of RCHAIN. Could this be because RCHAIN was a dying project, but they saw potential in the code? Most likely, because there's no question there's some logic in the project, but I can imagine they could see the issues with the co-op. We'll talk a little bit later about Casper because they actually seem to be getting a bit of traction at the moment, unlike RCHAIN. In January 2018, despite opposition from some of the members, a strategic partnership agreement was signed between Reflective and RCHAIN Cooperative. The agreement saw 100 million ROC tokens valued at 35 cents each, put into an investment fund managed by Reflective. This was when the true value hit a peak of $3 in the same January. Reflective was also to be paid an annual fee of either $2.2 million or 2% of the value of the fund. This was to be paid by RCHAIN over the next 5 years. This lessened the risk for Reflective Ventures side of the deal. After the deal with Ventures, RCHAIN Holdings continued operations, though it had been renamed Pythia in late 2017. Please note that the cooperative and the holdings are two different things. The now named Pythia had previously signed a deal with the RCHAIN co-op in March 2017. This occurred when Meredith was on both the board of RCHAIN and RCHAIN Holdings. The Pythia contract was then renegotiated in August of 2018. At the time, there was a clause where Greg agreed to step down from the board of Pythia. He also returned the shares he held in the company. RCHAIN agreed to give Pythia 105 million ROCs to put into an investment fund, 5 million more than it did Reflective. There was another key difference between the Pythia and Reflective deals as well, which became important in late 2018. Another clause in the contract with Pythia stated that if RCHAIN failed to develop a working version of its blockchain platform by March 31st, 2019, then Pythia would be allowed to keep the 105 million ROC. I mean, it definitely seems like a bit of a medium to large sized dumpster fire. An anonymous investor at the time stated,
"It was ludicrous how these deals were structured though. For both Reflective and Pythia, effectively research and development goals had to be achieved by the cooperative by certain dates, otherwise the ROC tokens contributed by the firms would be kept by the firms. That's the same as you giving your money to an investment manager, and if you don't do certain things, the manager keeps all your money. No fund on earth works this way. I believe a lot of the deals constructed between the cooperative and entities like Pythia and Reflective had clauses that would never be acceptable in real business world. But it appears Greg Meredith plays by his own moral compass."
Throughout 2018, both Reflective Ventures and Pythia began funding for startups. These startups would be able to build dApps for RCHAIN, which must have seemed promising at the time. But then in August 2018, RCHAIN made a decision that embroiled the project in a new controversy. RCHAIN decided to invest, using its own funds, in a music streaming dApp called RSong. According to several investors, as well as the crypto news site The Block, the deal saw RCHAIN pay $23 million to Immersion Networks, a software studio that develops audio technology. 23 million? Come on guys. Greg stated there was an NDA regarding the deal with Immersion, but a balance sheet released at the annual member meeting showed a liability of $5.6 million to Immersion. Under the terms of the deal, Immersion developed a software player and gave RCHAIN a multi-year license to use its audio codec. The idea was that RSong would run on RCHAIN and allow users to pay for music streaming with ROC tokens. An investor basically said what I thought and told The Block,
"I am not saying it's not a good piece of tech, but it was a crazy amount for what we had. Let's say you're building a house for yourself and it's $1 million, but then you find a nice piece of furniture and you blow $500,000 on it. And now you don't have enough to finish the house and you've completely destroyed the main project you're working on."
A very good point, anonymous investor. On October 17, 2018, RCHAIN uploaded a community debrief which discussed the financial shortfalls at the time. These would mean that they wouldn't be able to fund the launch of their validator network and other mainnet features. In the same video, they touch on RSong and the conversation gets a little tense. During the video as well, Greg mysteriously got technical issues at the exact point key questions came up about RSong and the struggle to finish the blockchain. Once he recovered, he still seemed to find a way to sway the questions as much as he could, for as long as he could. Greg stated nearing a closure on several 8-figure deals at the time but could not reveal the details. It looks like these never materialized, and by majority they were dependent on RSong. The large deals involved the resale of assets that were developed on the RSong application, which was apparently going to plan. These were either selling the whole app itself or just bits that were developed within the app, certain technologies. He was burping all sorts of delusions that if they got a deal for RSong, it would send a message that RCHAIN dApps were already selling for 8 figures, and it was essentially a marketing tool to get the word out there about the blockchain. He acknowledged that they were having issues with marketing and development at the time, and I think this still shows now too, just as much as then. He also stated that the blockchain and ICO craze were drying up, so there needed to be a different approach. I mean, maybe there was a reason he was struggling so much more than the other projects he were trying to claim superiority over. Greg claimed that the struggle with funding was not down to the deal with Immersion, but because the value of crypto, and specifically ETH tokens, had dropped dramatically in value. One of the first things you tell newbies interested in crypto is that the price of the currency is not the main focus. The focus is on the project's strengths and if you believe in that project. And the literal leader of that project is blaming its failings on the price of the token. It doesn't really matter what he says. He essentially sacrificed being able to complete development on the blockchain, the chain's whole purpose, in order to fund a defunct music app. And this defunct music app was created to be a marketing tool for the blockchain that hasn't been completed yet? Oh Greg, you daft lemon. I mean, why did ETH survive through the same period and come out the other side to be the second biggest crypto in the world? How did they do it without hiding inside a Trojan horse that looks like a music app and then popping out to surprise everyone? Because their core product was there, and they weren't a turd that needed glittering. I mean, ETH isn't even the best blockchain by any standard. It has a lot of issues that everyone else is trying to capitalize on, but even with that, it only goes to show how misguided RCHAIN has been. The financial problems would only get worse from there, and in mid-October 2018, RCHAIN sent a letter to Pythia, a letter stating that I wouldn't be able to deliver the mainnet version of RCHAIN until April 1st. This was just one day after the deadline they had to fix anything that kept RCHAIN from being commercially viable. In response, Pythia exercised its termination rights, releasing this public statement that confirmed their termination. The agreement was that RCHAIN would produce a functional mainnet by a specific date, so Pythia could fund a number of companies to build on top of the blockchain. And surprise, surprise, later on, Greg said,
"It was a typo on the part of the letter. Instead of putting 11:59 March 31st, someone wrote April 1st. There was no intent to delay or anything like that. It was literally just a typo."
There was quite a bit of confusion over what date they were actually meant to deliver the mainnet, which was December 31st, 2018, not April 31st, 2019. This was actually the date they had to fix any technical bugs, so really they were 3 months late on the mainnet launch. Following this, and to no surprise, Reflective Ventures planned a backup, which turned out to be Casper Labs. Former Reflective partner Steve Carell is CFO. They were in the process of forking RCHAIN's open source code, and now this is a thing, and it's out in the wild. The block reported at the time that Casper Labs was also raising a Series A funding round with verbal commitments of $20 million. Now here's the thing, Casper genuinely looks like it's set to go places. It's getting a lot of things right that RCHAIN just didn't, and it seems like a far more focused and driven hard fork of RCHAIN. Greg seemed to have unfortunate control over how things were run, and it really wasn't for the best. It was all over the place, very hard to justify or give reason to many of the decisions made, and they got into some unusual investment deals. Looking into Casper, the website seems decent. It's super clear, they display their purposes and their intentions clearly. They launched their tokens this year and it's already generated buzz online, with clickbaiters quickly hyping it up, but it doesn't feel like empty hype at all. We see some use cases for the currency and a very technical and detailed white paper. As well as this, they've gained a decent following on Twitter. They have an extremely solid and extensive team with former employees from Microsoft, Adobe, Dropbox and Facebook to name a few. And compared with RCHAIN, which I think has a fairly small team by now, it does seem more functional. RCHAIN currently only has 7 members visible on their website, and one of those is a music producer who has an interest in blockchain's potential for creating alternative solutions for the artist and appreciator relationship. If you're going to have a small team, you'd think you'd make the members count. I'm obviously not sure about how they operate internally, but it doesn't seem like something hot for development. I would guess the producer was probably better suited for the RSong days, but you know. Almost everyone on the Casper team has a LinkedIn, so we have a very good visibility there. Casper themselves are not free from the wrath of the Reddit community though, as of course the mischievous bandits that stormed the gates of RCHAIN had their hand in the creation of Casper too, but as long as everyone's behaving these days, it does look like a promising project. And RCHAIN doesn't look like it's completely down and out, they still talk some sense and they're still marching on. And I do think there's some potential, even if it's small, but there just seems to be something missing with them, and there always has been. They're not really trying to push their brand enough. There have been many times where he's expressed ideas that aren't logical. I have no doubt that Greg is very intelligent, but the way he steered things has just been poop. Some of the issues have been because of financial struggle and some because of decision making, but both have definitely overlapped, and some of the investment deals they've taken haven't helped this at all. Most importantly is misdirection and overestimating what they could achieve too, especially during the R-Song period. These days, the side distraction is quite clearly environmental activism. Don't get me wrong, the environment is a very important part of our lives and of our future, and in blockchain. However, it feels like this is taking priority once more over the blockchain itself. They dedicate a weekly video every week, almost entirely focused on climate. I'm not saying they don't care about the environment and Greg doesn't care about the environment, but maybe it's another marketing ploy to draw attention to RCHAIN, to gain traction through an environmental standpoint and go from there. He always references people like Bill Gates and compares his own environmental ideas with theirs, almost like a name drop kind of thing. This year he wrote an open letter to Tesla too, speaking about Bitcoin and suggesting a conversation with Elon. In the letter he very much sounded like he was on a high horse, and quite frankly just repeating something they said a million times in various interviews and presentations, discussing how he knew all the solutions to blockchain's problems, talking down ETH and Bitcoin, making the analogy of an 8-lane freeway versus a 1-lane freeway. This is the horizontal concurrency solution I mentioned earlier. For around 4 years he failed to market a product that he thought was superior, and now it generally looks like he's trying to capitalise on the old Elon Musk hype. We all know exactly what Elon can do for crypto, so how convenient that he's essentially trying to sell Elon the idea of a blockchain which has gotten nowhere. If we took his mindset behind the R-Song shambles, it does seem like this could be applied here, basically trying to piggyback off anything else that will make his blockchain popular. Either because he can't, or possibly because it's junk and he just doesn't want to admit it. I don't think Greg is entirely disingenuous, but I do think there's another side to these moves he makes. And in terms of RCHAIN as a blockchain, I'm just not sure what it's really meant to be doing at the moment, or what it's ever meant to have been doing. So to summarise, my first BINCOIN or WINCOIN, I'd say Casper Labs at the moment is definitely a WINCOIN, and Greg can get in the bin. Let me know what you think in the comments. Bye.